based on facts. Give me any hypothetical fact. By the way, do you know any facts that I will destroy evidence? Let's take it me personally.
I cannot,
Because Jack Smith went into court and said, I will destroy evidence if I know about the subpoena. And this clown signed the order one after the other after the other. Are you aware of any basis? Look, I'm a member of the bar. I take my obligations seriously.
Welcome back to Freedom Forge, where we defend liberty and tell the truth that corporate media wants to keep from you. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you never miss an update on the battle for the Constitution and our republic. Tonight, we're going to break down one of the most explosive Senate hearings we've seen in years. This hearing exposed what can only be described as a jaw-dropping abuse of power from the highest echelons of the Biden Justice Department and the FBI. Senators questioned witnesses about Special Counsel Jack Smith's so-called investigation, which I honestly would call a political witch hunt, one that reached into virtually every conservative organization it could find.
Thank you. Let's start with the foundation. Ms. Cleveland, Jack Smith issued nearly 200 subpoenas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Those subpoenas targeted over 400 Republican individuals and organizations, correct?
Correct.
Many of whom had no connection to those who entered the Capitol on January 6th, correct?
Absolutely.
And in fact, some of those organizations didn't even exist on January 6th. Is that correct?
It is.
So we're not talking about a narrow investigation. We're talking about a sweeping operation targeting virtually the entirety of the other side politically.
It was a fishing expedition.
So let's turn to the Constitution. Subpoenaing the toll records of members of Congress, does that raise serious constitutional concerns?
Absolutely. And in fact, we have the PIN who notified the special counsel's office of those concerns. And Jack Smith had apparently said that he was going to consult with the Solicitor General, according to the release of the information from Senator Grassley this morning. Yet when he was deposed by the House and was specifically asked if he spoke with the Solicitor General, he said, on this discrete issue, no.
Among other issues, it raises significant issues with the speech and debate clause, correct?
Absolutely.
So much so that, as you noted, when Jack Smith subpoenaed AT&T to get my toll records, AT&T refused to comply with the subpoena because they concluded that it violated the speech and debate clause. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct, and they backed down.
Jack Smith did not try to enforce that subpoena, did he?
He did not.
He did not go to court and litigate the matter, did he?
He did not.
Does that suggest, as it does to me, that he knew damn well what he was doing was illegal and would not be upheld in court?
It does suggest that.
When the federal government subpoenas donor lists, internal communications, organization records, does that implicate the First Amendment and also freedom of association in particular?
It does, and the Supreme Court made that clear in the NAACP case.
Mr. Chamberlain, aside from the legal violations, what specific crimes, if any, were actually uncovered as a result of the Arctic Frost investigation?
I'm not aware of any crimes that were uncovered.
Would the senators, donors, organizations, and individuals who were surveilled and subpoenaed have ever learned about the Arctic Frost investigation had Trump not won in 2024?
Probably not, mainly because of these non-disclosure orders, but also, I mean, the fact that a lot of these records we're now just learning about them because they were in these prohibited access files only available to the FBI director. So if the FBI director was a Democrat, there's no reason to think we'd know about them.
How would you compare the scope of the violations in Arctic Frost to Watergate?
I think, if anything, it might even be greater. I mean, the scope of this in terms of the sheer number of people and organizations affected, and as I discussed, I mean, this brazen violation of attorney-client privilege, wiretapping a phone call between Susie Wiles and her lawyer, these are egregious offenses. And you know, if Watergate was just about a single break-in, I mean, this is effectively, compound that by 200.
All right, Mr. O'Leary, I appreciate your service. One of the things you testified is you said, quote, the effectiveness and legitimacy of the FBI depend on its independence from political influence. I very much agree with that, and I will say as an alumnus of the Department of Justice, I am deeply saddened, and frankly, I'm angry that under President Biden, the Department of Justice and the FBI were weaponized and its integrity badly, badly compromised. You are right. That's how the FBI is supposed to behave, and that's how the Department of Justice is supposed to behave. So Jack Smith was not investigating a crime based on evidence. He issued subpoenas to get the toll records of the following senators: Mike Lee, seated to my right; Josh Hawley; Lindsey Graham; John Kennedy, seated to my right; Marsha Blackburn; Ron Johnson; Rick Scott; Bill Hagerty; Dan Sullivan; Tommy Tuberville; Cynthia Lummis, and myself. That's over 20% of the Republicans in the United States Senate. Mr. O'Leary, is it consistent with the obligations of the Department of Justice and the FBI to issue subpoenas with no factual basis and no legal basis?
Senator, it is not, and in my experience, FBI agents would never approach a matter without the proper justification and articulable facts to open their investigation.
Okay, good. So you said they would never do that. Judge Boasberg signed an order, I'm holding the order right here, in which he concludes, and I'm going to read, the court finds reasonable grounds to believe that such disclosure, in other words, notifying the senators on that list, will result in destruction of or tampering with evidence, intimidation of potential witnesses, and serious jeopardy of the investigation. Are you aware of any factual basis whatsoever that a dozen senators will destroy evidence?
I am not, but I will tell you that non-disclosure orders are a routine part of investigations.
Based on facts. Give me any hypothetical fact. By the way, do you know any facts that I will destroy evidence? Let's take it me personally.
I cannot,
Because Jack Smith went into court and said, I will destroy evidence if I know about the subpoena. And this clown signed the order one after the other after the other. Are you aware of any basis? Look, I'm a member of the bar. I take my obligations seriously. The FBI signed off on that. Mike Lee concluded he would destroy evidence. John Kennedy, well, Louisiana, maybe. I will say, I'll give a special dispensation for the great state of Louisiana. But there is no basis. By the way, is it consistent with DOJ's obligation to also ask a judge to violate the law and not inform the judge of it?
No, it would not be.
Well, 2 U.S.C. Section 6628 explicitly bars non-disclosure orders applying to the Senate. And yet, in the lawless Department of Justice, I assume they didn't tell Judge Boasberg, hey, we're asking you to violate the law. Would you sign this? Do you assume that as well?
You would have to ask the DOJ that, but you make a good point, Senator.
Thank you.
Let's set the stage. What you heard was testimony about Special Counsel Jack Smith issuing nearly 200 subpoenas. That's right, 200, targeting over 400 Republican individuals and organizations. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a handful of people who actually broke the law or went into the Capitol on January 6th. A huge number of these people and groups had no connection whatsoever to anything illegal. In fact, some of these organizations didn't even exist back on January 6th. Think about that. The DOJ was rifling through records and communications of groups that weren't around during the events they supposedly were investigating. This was not a focused inquiry into criminal activity. This was a wide-ranging dragnet, a political operation designed to intimidate and silence the conservative movement. This is exactly what the left has spent years accusing the right of wanting to do, if ever given power. And now here they are doing it blatantly. Think about what's come out. Jack Smith and the DOJ subpoenaed toll records, donor lists, and internal communications of conservative senators and organizations. They wanted to know who was funding us, who we're talking to, and, let's be honest, who they need to destroy. When Senator Cruz, and yes, that was him you heard, Asked about the constitutionality of this, the answer was very clear. This was a gross violation of the First Amendment and of Americans' freedom of association. These are not supposed to be negotiable rights. Let's remember history. The Supreme Court made clear back in the famous NAACP v. Alabama case that the government can't just demand lists of donors as a way to harass political opponents, not unless there's a clear and urgent need for the information. That precedent is being ignored in this so-called investigation. They did it anyway. Why? Because they think they, and the left in general, are above the law. Things get even shadier. When Jack Smith's team tried to get toll records from AT&T, the company refused. They knew that this violated the speech and debate clause of the Constitution, which is there to keep the executive branch from intimidating Congress for political reasons. AT&T said no because they didn't want to break the law. Did Jack Smith back down, realizing he was over the line? You bet. He didn't even try to enforce that subpoena. He knew what he was doing was wrong and wouldn't survive in court, but he tried anyway, just to see what he could get away with. Now, pause and think about this. Why would DOJ and the FBI do all this in secret with gag orders and secret files, unless they knew what they were doing was wrong? They never thought Trump would win in 2024 and expose their activities to sunlight. If that election result had gone the other way, none of us would ever know about this. It would all be buried in the prohibited access files. That is, files that only the FBI director can see. No accountability, no transparency, and certainly no one held responsible. Compare all of this to Watergate, which the media has called the worst abuse of power in modern history. According to one of the hearing witnesses, if anything, this is even greater. Watergate was a criminal break-in at a political office. This is the top law enforcement officials in America spying on and harassing dozens, if not hundreds, of their political opponents under the color of law. I want you to hear this list of senators whose toll records Jack Smith's team subpoenaed. Mike Lee, Josh Hawley, Lindsey Graham, John Kennedy, Marsha Blackburn, Ron Johnson, Rick Scott, Bill Hagerty, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Cynthia Lummis, and even Senator Cruz himself. That's more than 20% of the Republican United States Senate, targeted, spied on, and kept in the dark. If this was reverse, if a Republican administration was caught spying on a fifth of Democratic senators, CNN and MSNBC would be running wall-to-wall coverage and screaming for impeachment. But the media is all but silent here. Let's talk about those non-disclosure orders. Judge Boasberg signed off on requests from Jack Smith's DOJ not to notify senators that they were under surveillance. Why? Because, supposedly, these senators might destroy evidence. But as Senator Cruz pressed, there was never any factual basis presented that any one of them would destroy evidence. No facts, just innuendo and political narrative. This is not just a fishing expedition. It's deep-sea trawling, hoping something comes up that can be spun into a scandal. And more damning, it appears DOJ was asking judges to sign these non-disclosure orders without even warning the judges that the law, 2 U.S.C. 6628, explicitly bars these kinds of orders from being applied to sitting senators. That's not just misconduct. That's the definition of weaponizing the system to punish your opposition and using government secrecy to cover your tracks. Here's where I want to tell you what this means. If you care about American freedom, this isn't just an attack on a few senators or some conservative donors. This is a precedent, and if it stands, no one's safe. If the DOJ, with the blessing of the mainstream media, can spy on and harass Republicans, they can do it to anyone who stands in their way. To you, your church, your business, your local patriot group. If they can silence the opposition for their political gain, there's nothing left of the constitutional system. The America we know and love does not survive with secret police tactics in the name of saving democracy. So what do? We have to fight back, peacefully, legally, but relentlessly. Demand accountability from your elected officials. Speak up against the blatant weaponization of government. Get loud on social media. And, most importantly, stay informed. Support channels like Freedom Forge because the more we grow, the louder the truth becomes and the harder it is for the regime to ignore us. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into what's happening behind the closed doors of power. And comment below, what do you think about this sweeping abuse? Are you worried about what happens next? Or do you see a silver lining with these revelations coming to light?